Hello, beautiful people. Today we will talk about the modeling mode in Unreal Engine. I don't want you to model your whole project inside Unreal, but what you can do is prototyping simple levels, prototyping the environment, and fixing meshes. You can remesh, you can chain the pivots, you can assign multiple materials, and much more, thanks to the improvements we get in the modeling mode. Now, if you don't have the modeling mode in your editor, all you need to do is to go to Edit, click on Plugins, and here, search for Modeling, and you're gonna find Modeling Tools Editor Mode. Enable this, restart your engine, and you should be good to go. My favorite shortcut is Shift 5, Shift 1. This is how I quickly switch between selection mode and the modeling mode. Let's press Shift 5. The modeling mode is divided into multiple categories here, and you can create primitives, you can fix the pivots or the transform of objects, you can deform objects, you can change the typology of objects. In fact, there is a lot you can do with the modeling mode. These tools are improving as we go, so I highly recommend learning these tools. This will really help you a lot if you learn the essential tools. The first option here we have on top is create. From here we can create basic primitives like a box, a sphere, rectangle, stairs. We can also draw our own polygons, and you can draw a path. You can revolve around the path, and in the recent updates we have the ability to draw a spline. So as I said, this is improving with every Unreal Engine version, which is really good. To explain the modeling mode in the easiest way possible, let's start with the box. As you know, all 3D applications have no problem rendering quads. However, in a game engine, everything is made of triangles. So let's click on the box to create. Now, before I click on accept, I want to increase the subdivisions to 3 by 3 by 3, and I will keep the dimensions as they are. And I want you to pay attention to the PolyGroup mode. This is now set to per face. Now, let's click on accept and let's create another box. Let's change the PolyGroup mode from per face to per quad. And while we're at it, let's change the material to a grid, so you have the ability to set the material on your meshes before you create them. And let's click again. Click on accept and let's isolate these two, or we can take them outside so we can have more freedom, more space to work with. And now the next tool I want you to meet is under model. Here you need to select just one mesh. When you have two meshes selected, you will notice some buttons are enabled, and when you have one mesh selected, you will see the opposite. Some buttons are enabled and some others are disabled. Boolean, for example, you need two objects to subtract or add to each other. Now, this is the mesh we created first. If you go to PolyGroup mode, you're gonna see that we have the red edges, and you can select any face and simply move it, rotate it, scale it. And you might wonder, yeah, that's cool, but did we not add 3 subdivisions? And the answer is yes. Click accept real quick. This is ugly, I'm sorry, but it's okay. Now, let's select the other box, and the box that we've created, it has the PolyGroup mode set to per quad. This one here, the one we created earlier, it was set to per face. So let's click on per shape and create another, and let's click accept. And now let's select this box, go to deform, go to model, click on PolyGroup edit, and now we can see that we have these polygroups. These are not quads, these are polygroups, because if we go to the wireframe mode, you're gonna see that everything here is made of triangles. And the polygroups will replace our polygons. They are the solution for that, or the workaround in a game engine. I will switch back to let, and from here, we can do operations on the faces that I will cover later in the video. For the fun of it, you can extrude and look at this. This is so cool. Once you're happy, you can click accept. If you're not happy, click on escape or cancel. Now, let's select this box and let's go back to PolyGroup edit, and you will notice that this one has no polygroups, or it has just one polygroup. So when you click on it, you can see that the whole box is selected. Maybe you want that, or maybe no, we need more polygroups. And if you want to generate polygroups for your models, you can go to attributes, and here we have two options. We have generate polygroups and we also have paint polygroups. And they are both handy in their specific situations. Let's go with generate polygroups, and the conversion mode. By default, it will take face normal deviation. You can click here to set this to a different mode. So face normal deviation, we're gonna see different colors for every face. If you like to switch this to another, so find quads, now we have all these. It's trying its best to find quads, which is very cool. And for different types of meshes or more complex meshes, you can try other options. So we have UV islands and we have hard normal seams, and it depends on the complexity of a mesh. You may want to choose different conversion mode. For now, I will click on escape, delete this, and let's go back to create. Let's click on the box and let's see what happens when we click again and change the dimensions. So you can change the height, you can change the depth and the width. As you can see, the UVs are cool. That's because I have this option, world space UV scale, enabled. If you disable this, and it's disabled by default, you're gonna see that the UVs now are kind of messed up, or not as we want them to be. So now look, you may or may not want this, the stretching of UVs or how they act on the mesh. If you want perfect mapping on your mesh, then you want to click on World Space UV Scale. And this way, when you create any new mesh, it will have good UVs. You can also show wireframe if you need it. Now the wireframe is blue and my material here is blue, so let's switch to another material. And you can see more clearly the wireframe of the mesh. Let's disable the wireframe. Let's click actually on cancel and let's go back to box. And when you move your mouse, you're gonna see the box is being placed on the top of the normals of any mesh we hover on top of it. So if I move my mouse on this side, the box will be on the side that we see from the right. If you move it on the top, it's on the top. So you can easily place your mesh wherever you want. And this also works with Cesium terrain. This is also very cool. There are two other methods to position our mesh. We have the target position here. We have on scene. We have ground plane. So if you click here on the ground plane, where is the mesh? Well, it's on the ground plane. This box now is on the 0 in terms of the Z value. And you can switch this to at origin, where we're gonna have our box at the 0, 0, 0 of our world. Let's switch this back to on scene. In addition to selecting the target position of the item we want to place, we also have the ability to change the pivot location. By default, it's set to base, but also you can switch this to the center and the top. So if you click on centered, now this will be in the exact center. And if you switch this to the top, you're gonna see this is now placed on the top. So if I click on the ceiling here, for example, the mesh will be placed on the top. And if I change the height, now it will go like this. So you may want to change these depending on how you're creating your mesh. And when you place your mesh, you have the ability to move it around from here as well. And that's also very cool. Before we click on accept, I just want you to know that in terms of the output type, we will focus on static mesh, but if you want to explore more, there is volumes. This is a simple volume, and there is dynamic mesh. A static mesh is a static mesh. This means if we place it, and let's set this on the floor. So I enable surface snapping, and I click on these two axes to place it on the floor. And I go back to box, switch this to a dynamic mesh. And this has to do more with procedural generation if you want to create meshes that you can access later to change their values. we can do that, but on static meshes, we cannot. So now click accept and notice the difference here. This is here a static mesh. The two meshes we've created, this box, they are both static meshes. But this here, it says under the type, it's a dynamic mesh actor. If you click on this mesh and press on Ctrl B, you will see it in your content browser. And if you click on this mesh and you do the same, you're not going to see it because this is an Unreal object, U object. For 99.9 of your use scenarios, you're going to use static mesh. So now we can click on cancel and we can see something like the rectangle. This is useful if you want to create a floor, give it some textures and some displacement. We have the ability to create this. So if you set this to 500 by 500 and you can increase the subdivisions, you can displace this mesh, and this is something we do a lot. And when you're creating your meshes, you're going to see for each primitive, the box, the sphere, and so on, some shared options and some different options. So in this case here, we can go to rectangle type and switch this from rectangle to rounded rectangle, and these two options will be enabled. Now look at this. We have rounded corners depending on the value we have. So this is 25 units. If you want more roundness, you can add the number you want. And if you want to change the quality of the roundness here, you can increase or decrease the corner slices. So if you lower this to the lowest possible, you will have 3 corners and the default value is 16, and you can increase it more or put it to whatever value you like. And once you're happy, you can click on accept. In addition to creating simple meshes like the box and the sphere, torus, arrow, we can also create slightly more complex meshes. Well, I'm not gonna call this complex, but yes, you can create stairs, and we have multiple types of stairs. So an object like the stairs, we have linear stair, floating, curved, and spiral. And you can see the settings here. When I change this to curved, they will change, and if I click, it will create this nice curved stairs. If it's not too nice to your liking yet, we can change the number of steps, we can change the step width, the height, the curve, how much it's curved, and the inner radius as well. And just like the box and the rectangle, we have the polygroup mode. In fact, this is on all our basic shapes here. So cube grid, this is really interesting. If you click here, right now we don't see anything except for the mouse and some sort of a grid where we hover the mouse. If you click once, you're gonna see this. And if you click and drag, you're gonna see a bigger grid. And under here, shortcut info, you're gonna see things you can do. So if you press E multiple times, you can increase the height. If you press on Q, as it says here, you can decrease the height or the grid size. If you click here again and press E, look at this, press Q, press on this side, press E, Q. So this is really useful if you want to quickly prototype levels or areas of your projects. And if you don't like this, you can always switch to a material that you like. Nothing changed. That's because when we add now new grids, you're gonna see this. So now if you switch this to another material and click again, it will add another material. So this is something you can do to build different areas. I will click on cancel and I will click on yes. So this will save our mesh. For some reason it's called stairs. I think it's called stairs because I was selecting the stairs here when I wanted to create the grid. So let's say this is a happy accident where I merged these two together. Go to mesh, go to triangle select, and from here we can simply select triangles and do some edits to them. As you can see, here I have my brush, and we can change the brush type and size from here. So starting with the size, you can click like so to reduce it or increase the size. Click somewhere, and if you don't want to click on everything, you don't need to press Ctrl to add to your selection. It will simply add to your selection. If you want to remove from your selection, press on Shift to remove. Let's say you wanted to select just this part, but you have more complex mesh. There are things we can do in terms of the selection edit. We can clear it, select everything, invert selection, and grow our selection, or flood fill. This is something I use a lot, flood fill. I select a part and then I click flood fill, and then I either delete or disconnect. Earlier we discussed creating polygroups, so you can also do that from here. And I don't want to click on disconnect, I want to click on separate. This will detach this into its own static mesh. Disconnect will simply disconnect faces from each other. I will leave exploring all these different options and tools for you. I will focus on the important things for me and for you today the most, but if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. Now, let's click on accept. Let's select this mesh. This is now the submesh, and this is another submesh. Notice when we separated this mesh from this mesh, we still have the exact same pivot. Let's say I'm not happy with the placement of this pivot and I want to change it. So we can go to Xform and we can go to Edit Pivot. And from here, you have box positions. Imagine a box around this mesh, and based on what you click here, it will place the pivot for you. So most of the times you're going to use bottom, and this will place the pivot under the mesh in the middle as much as possible for you. Now you can change the location, and here we are. Now let's delete this and this and this to keep our scene clean, and let's go back to our box here. I won't jump between these tools unless I want to explain a tool. So let's go back to create to finish this menu here. Now let's try extrude a polygon, and this will allow you to draw a polygon and extrude it. So this will draw on the floor the 0 point, as you can see here from the grid. So I'm going to press escape and click on extrude polygon again, and you're gonna see it placed a grid for us. And the same will happen when you click on extrude path and revolve path. You can change the location of the grid manually, or you can press on Ctrl, click somewhere, and that will place the grid for you. So let's say I want to draw on top of the terrace here. All I need to do is to press Ctrl, click, and here we are. Let's say I want to draw railing. I can simply go to the top here and click. It will snap to corners, as you can see from here, and you can change this behavior, but for now I will keep it. So click once, click to create the railing you want to create, just like so. If you make a mistake, you can press Ctrl Z to go back one step, snap, and just like that, we are able to create a polygon. Now this is not a railing, I should have used path, but that's okay. Let's remove this happy accident and go back to extrude polygon again, and let's talk about this. From here, you have enable snapping. If you are not happy with the behavior of the tool, you don't want to snap here or anywhere, you can either disable snapping completely, or you can say, okay, I just want to snap to edges. You can also do that. And notice now when I move my mouse close to an edge, we will see that, yep, this is snapping to an edge. Now, don't forget to press Ctrl, click somewhere to bring your grid here and start drawing. Now, let's try drawing on the wall here, for example. So I press on Ctrl, click on the wall, and now our grid is vertical. So now I click, let's click multiple times, make a funny shape, and once you create your shape, you can move your mouse to change the extrusion. And notice on the left of the screen here, the extrusion mode is set to interactive. You can change this, but for now, keep it as it is. Click once, click complete, and that's our polygon. Lovely. Let's go back to extrude polygon and let's see the options we have here. So in terms of the draw mode, we have freehand, circle, square, rectangle, rounded rectangle, and ring. Let's switch this to rounded rectangle, for example. Press Ctrl to place our grid on the wall, and I will disable snapping for now. I will click once and I'll click on another place, and now I can move my mouse to draw a rectangle just like that. And if you want to extrude to a specific area, you can simply just move your mouse to that area. So if I want to snap to this part here, we can simply move the mouse here, click, and that's it. Beautiful. Click complete, and here we are. Let's go back to Extrude Polygon, and you can change the extrusion mode from interactive to flat to fixed. Flat is flat, and fixed is whatever value you set here. So let's set this to 50, for example, and let's switch the draw mode to square, and let's click Control, click here, and I will click, and now we can draw a square, just like that. Click, and the extrusion is set to 50. If you're happy, click on complete, and that's it. Let's go to Extrude Path, and this is what it says. You can draw and extrude a path. So let's say, for example, I want to draw on top of the road here from Cesium. Extrude Path, hold Control, click somewhere, and now you can click. Once you're happy, notice when I move my mouse on top of the point, the color of the path will change from orange to yellow. Click, set the extrusion, click, set the height, and click. That's cool. Once you're happy, click on complete. Another thing you can do is creating a path with rounded corners. So let's move here, for example, on the tab, and let's click here. Before we create the path, press Ctrl to move the grid, and now click and click again. So I'm making breaks here. Once we're happy, click. We set the width. Once you're happy, click once more. This will set how much round our corners. So notice now it was very harsh, and now if you move your mouse, it will create a smooth path. Click. Now we will set the height. If that's not cool, I don't know what it is. In addition to creating polygons and drawing path, we can also revolve around a path. So click on this one, and this one too has a grid, and let's move to a place. Let's say here, press Ctrl, click like so, and you can draw a shape of your liking. Close the shape, and if you're happy, you can click accept. If you are not, you can select one of the points you've created and move them just like this and see changes happen in real time. Very cool. Click accept. This will create a completely closed shape. If you want to create something that is not closed, we can go back to the Revolve Poly Path. Press on Ctrl to add the grid here. Let's create a path real quick. So that's a happy tree. And let's make it half a tree if you want by simply changing the degrees. So let's say 180. Nothing changed from this side, but if you go to the other side, it's gone. If you reset this to 360, you're gonna see the remaining part of our model. If you set this to 45, then it's just 45, just like so. If you want to offset where this is placed, you can do that from the degrees offset. It will offset around our shape. If you want to draw a spline, we can do that simply from here and click, and every time you click and drag your mouse, you can set the anchors or the roundness here. When you release the mouse, the point have been created, and then create again, create again. So here we have options like loop. This will close our path, and you can animate things on this if you're wondering. You can change the raycast targets to world object, custom plane, ground plane. So if you want to see the path, you can see it's snapping perfectly on our terrain here, which is really, really nice. Now I'm going to click on cancel, and I think that's it for most of the important tools here. In the next part, we will talk about Xform. Under Xform, the option here, duplicate, is really important, and I use this a lot. Let's say I have a mesh like this, and we have multiple instances of this mesh, and I decide, it's a good day to go to Model, PolyGroup Edit, click multiple parts. So I'm holding Shift now to select multiple polygroups, and I want to extrude. So it's a good day to extrude, like so. Now, this is the mesh. Click accept, and notice what happened. It will affect everything else. So if you don't want this, press Ctrl Z, and Unreal, please don't crash. Thank you, Unreal, for not crashing. Go to Xform, click on duplicate, and this will duplicate our mesh into a new mesh. So if you press Ctrl B on this mesh, you're gonna see it's box something something, and if you press on this mesh, now it's a new object. So if I decide it's a good day to edit this again, but this time selecting these three here and click on extrude, let's extrude this to the same height as this. And now if you click accept, that's exactly what we expect, just for this mesh to change. You have no idea how many times I forgot to do this, and by mistake I would mess up many objects in my scene. So be careful when you're using these tools to make unique objects. When you click on duplicate, this will make a unique object. Work on that unique object. So that's a non-destructive workflow. Once you're happy, you can replace the other objects, or nope, you really want a duplicate or a unique object. In addition to duplicate, we already discussed edit pivot. So if you want to change the pivot, you can click on edit pivot. Let's say this time we want the pivot on the top. You can do that left, right, and so on. So that's it for the edit pivot. That's really important, and I use this a lot. And if you want to place objects in interesting ways, or you simply just want to have fun, you can go to pattern. Let's move this box here and let's go to pattern. And as you can see, this will create instances of our box. And you have multiple shapes for your pattern. We have line, we have grid, and we have circle. Each of these have their own settings. So if you go to grid, you're gonna see we have the grid on the Y, X. If you go to circle, we have the radial pattern. And if you select the line, then we have the linear pattern. You can set the count. And if you don't want for your objects to overlap, you can switch the spacing mode from by count to packed. This will guarantee that your meshes will not overlap on top of each other. And I want you to notice here, this red button. If you click and drag, this will also help you change the settings. So you can do that directly from here. If you don't want to go to the settings here, whether you are on by count, you can click and drag to change the extent, or if you are using step size, you can click and drag. So this will guarantee step size. All meshes are next to each other. So if you choose step size, you can have a step size, change this. And if you set it to 100, this is the width of our box. If you reduce this, now they will overlap. So we don't want that. If you want more, now 150, they will always stay 150. And if you click here and drag, it will add 150 units between each of these. So we have now 1, 2, and so on. Pattern is very cool, very fun to work with, and will help you place your objects in Unreal faster. Click on accept, and when you click on pattern, you're gonna see here there is an object called pattern. Now, how do we select all these? Do you remember earlier when we worked with Cesium, Sun and Sky? When you click on a mesh, you have the details panel, and then you have the components here. So all these components here, you can select them individually from here. If you want to do anything to them, you can do that from here. This is actually organized. I like it. Since I moved this, why don't we move even more? So let's move this here, and let's click on some of these. Click. So the moment you click on any of these here, you can move them. But if you do this, then this. So notice now if I want to click, I cannot click on these individually unless I click here first, move one of them or not, and then I can select them individually. Let's say this does not make you happy. You can actually click the pattern you've created or multiple objects and click on align. And you can align on X, Y, and Z. Let's say Z, they are perfect, but they are not perfect on the Y axis. So we can click on align Y, and they are now perfectly aligned. So in terms of align type, we have bounding box, pivots. They will have the same effect here. Align to the first object selected. So if you select two or multiple objects, so I'm gonna click accept on this, and let's make duplicates here, like so. And now these are really not aligned, which is perfect. Let's select all these. And if you go back to align, we have the align to first selected, last selected, or combined. If you click on combined, it will take the average of all these. If you want to combine on the Z, you can do that. If you want to move them all on the same line, then we can combine them on the X, and the more you explore these settings, the more cool tricks you will learn. Click accept, and now all these static meshes are aligned. This is really useful. If you have multiple objects that you want to merge together, let's say these 4 objects here, we can do that from here. This is something we use a lot as well, and it will ask you, where do you want to write this? Do you want to write to a new object, or the first selected object, the last selected object, and what do you want to name this, and where do you want to output this, what do you want to replace this with from the input, and how do you want to output this selection, this combination of meshes? Do you want to keep it exactly as it is from the input? So let's say if you were combining U objects, the dynamic ones we discussed earlier, or to a volume or a static mesh, these are the 3 types. From input, it will assume if this is a static mesh, then it's just a static mesh. And finally, on tool accept, so when you click on accept, we have the handle inputs, delete inputs, hide them, keep the inputs. So the inputs are these objects. Do you want to delete them, or do you want to keep them? So let's say keep. Let's click accept, and now we have the combined meshes and we have the actual meshes. In addition to merging our meshes, we can also split our meshes. So click here and simply keep everything as it is and click accept. This is now 4 meshes. Split will split the selected meshes into separate parts based on their connectivity. Exactly what it says here. So if they are connected, imagine these 2 are merged, then they will not split. But in this scenario, because they are separate objects, we have 4 objects after we do the split. And finally, let's talk about bake transform. Let me do it on one of these meshes I downloaded online from the manufacturer website. So press Ctrl B to see these meshes and click drag. As you can see, this is another home here, and the scale is set to 1, 1, 1. And that's weird. Sometimes when you import meshes, they can be 10 times bigger or 10 times smaller. So if we set this to 0.1, this will now be to its correct scale. However, every single time I'm going to drag this, I am going to do this 0.1. No, that's really not cool. If you want to change this behavior, or if you want to save the scale here to from 0.1 to 1, so click here, and from here, when you click on it, you're gonna get a warning. And be careful when you use this, because if you have many meshes around and you bake one mesh, it will affect all instances. Be careful. In terms of the bake options, we have applied to all LODs. If your mesh have level of detail meshes, this will be applied. Bake rotation. So let's say for any reason, before I do anything actually, let's just duplicate this mesh. So it's a new object and click accept. Give it a second to make a duplication for us, and it will retain the same settings. And now let's go back to bake transform. So bake rotation, this will also set this to 0. In terms of the bake scale, we have bake full scale, or non-uniform, or do not bake the scale. I will keep this at bake full scale. If you want to do anything to the pivot, you can set the pivot to be recentered, but I will leave this as it is for now, and I will click on accept. Give it a few seconds, and now we have these set to 0. So in Blender, it's called apply transform. In 3ds Max, it's X form, and so on. Now, when I click Ctrl B and click and drag, I will always have my lovely baked mesh, just like so. We have a lot, so let's remove them, and let's move on to the next sections. Moving on in terms of the deformers, so under deformations, we have 8 operations as of now: vertex sculpt, dynamic sculpt, smooth, offset, warp, lattice, displace, and deform PolyGroups. Starting with the easiest, lattice, if you click on this, you're going to have a volume around your object, and that volume, you can control its resolution from here, and by simply clicking on any of the vertices, so click and drag to select multiple points in space, and you would imagine what this would do. This will deform the mesh based on how we change the location of these vertices. This is great for organic modeling. If you want to say this sofa now is organic, now the job is done. This sofa now is organic. So if you click accept and you're not happy, and I need to warn you about this, if you press Ctrl Z, this might take some time, and in past instances of Unreal Engine, it crashed the engine. So be careful if you want to modify really dense meshes. You can also sculpt on your meshes. So let's say vertex sculpt. This will take the exact number of vertices we have on our mesh. So if I press on Alt 2 to see the geometry of my mesh here, you can sculpt on these vertices. So let's switch back to let, click on vertex sculpt, and from here you can set the brush size, flow, laziness, the brush type. So there is sculpt N or normal, there is sculpt max, inflate, pinch. So this is a really basic sculpting tool with the basic tools. Keeping this on sculpt normal, click and drag, and this will do its thing. So this is too much. Press Ctrl Z, decrease the size, decrease the strength. So right now it's set to 0.5. You can set this to 0.1, and this is still too much. So press Ctrl Z multiple times. You can type the value, or you can click and drag, and this will help you define really small values. So now try to click. As you can see, this is sculpting in some places. If you press on Shift, this will smooth what we have, and it might deform the mesh in ways you don't like or in ways maybe you want. So depending on the strength, you will see the effects. You can also change the fall off of the brush. Right now it's set to smooth. You can set to linear, inverse, and these options here. If you click here, so let's say we want to just move the vertices, click and drag, and this will simply move the vertices. And this is really nice if you want to edit some wrinkles or to add some cushions or to place a pillow. You can use the sculpt tools. I will click cancel, and let's go to dynamic sculpt. Dynamic sculpt, it will add vertices or more detail to the areas we're going to sculpt. Let's start with reducing the size, and let's sculpt and see what happens. That's definitely not cool. We have the brush type set to move, so that's just simply move. If you click, you have the other brushes. And I believe sooner or later, the dynamic sculpt will get more improvements to look just like the vertex sculpt. So click this again, reduce this, the fall off, reduce the strength, and let's click on sculpt normal. Click once, it will add topology, and now you can sculpt as you want. So that's also really nice. It does not look nice, but the ability to have such a tool is really nice. So I leave having fun with this for you. Now we can go to smooth. It will do exactly what it says. It will smooth the mesh, but this will not sculpt. So you can see the corners. There will be definitely use scenarios for this. Offset is offset. So if I increase the distance, it will inflate the mesh, make the vertices away from each other. If you decrease it, you will see this abomination here. So you have multiple types, rotative, implicit. Reset this, give it a few seconds, and you can change the distance. And now the mesh is kind of loading. You will see this here, loading on the mesh. That's very cool. So yeah, there are these tools. You have them. Now you know about their existence. We have warp. This will warp our mesh, and this is actually cool. You can change the anchor. Now let's try this actually on a plane, because let's say you want to create a studio render. So let's do that. Let's go to create a rectangle, set the values you want. Let's say 750 and 750. And now let's increase the subdivisions. So I will also add 75 by 75 or whatever subdivisions you want. Click, accept. Let's go back to deform, warp, and let's control this. You can control these from here, or you can control them directly from the viewport. So if you click on rotate on the y-axis, this will rotate from this angle here, let's say to 0. And if you want to read, you can look at the numbers here for rotation and the offset. You can change the offset from here as well. And here we have two handles. Click, and you will see their effect. So now we almost have a backdrop for a studio. Click accept, rotate this, and move it to where you want. If you spend more time on this, you can make it longer and you can have fun creating lovely studio renders. And in addition to warp, we have displace. You can displace your mesh with noise or with textures. Right now we're using Berlin noise. You can use random noise. You can use a texture 2D map. So if you download displacement images to create your own ground textures, for example, you can do that from here. So let's click on one of these, texture 2D map, and this will prompt you to select displacement map. Let's see if we have any. I will quickly download the displacement map from Quixel Megascans and get back to you. So if you download an asset directly from Fab using Unreal Engine, it will not download the displacement map. But if you go to the web, here, you will find the texture sets, the JLTF, and even additional files. Let's download one of these sets. I click on download, and I will save this in a temp folder just for now. This is the file we've downloaded. If we open it and expand the names, ambient occlusion, base color, bump, cavity, displacement. This is what we want. So I will go back to Unreal, press Ctrl space, or here is actually my content browser. So I press on my folder and simply click and drag. Now I cannot do this, so let's copy this outside to unzip it and try that again. Here we are. This is the displacement map. Click and drag this image here. This will open the material designer for us because I have the motion design mode enabled. Let's close this. This is the image now. So if we take a look at our wall here, we can see it's beautifully displaced now. Let's click on accept and let's assign the material from Fab. And look at this, it's beautiful. So imagine creating multiple planes, multiple objects, and populating your ground. That's exactly what we do actually to achieve more photorealism. And the final option we have here is called Deform PolyGroups. If you click on it, we don't have polygroups on this mesh. So we can go to Mesh, Triangle Select, select few triangles, and we can create a polygroup from here. Click accept, and let's go back to deform polygroups, and now you can see this polygroup. So click and drag in this case on the axis you prefer. So we have the deformation is set to smooth, translation, translate, selection. We can select faces, edges, and vertices. Now let's talk about the tab here where it says shape modeling. Alright, so moving forward, we have model or shape modeling. We have polygroup edit, subdivide, Boolean, PolyCut, PlaneCut, mirror, mesh cut, and trim. Starting with polygroup edit, we discussed this earlier, where you can select an object with multiple polygroups and you can perform these operations. So let's select our good old box. I actually deleted them. Let's get rid of this as well so it won't distract us. And let's quickly create a box. Click accept and let's go to model. Now polygroup edit, and under face edits we have extrude, offset, push pull, inset, and so on. So click on a face, click on inset for example, move your mouse left and right. You can see in the middle how it's insetting the face. Let's say we're happy with this. Now you can try something like extrude, move it inwards, click accept, and this is very cool. The ability to model such meshes directly inside Unreal was not possible before, and with more improvements we can do more, which is always great. This allows us to stay in the engine as much as possible to achieve what we want. We have the ability to disconnect a face. So if you click a face, click on disconnect, it is now disconnected, and you can click on outset. This will outset is the inverse of inset. If you want to do this, I will not. You can click on bevel. So let's find the face first to bevel, or let's press Ctrl Z a couple of times, click cancel, go to polygroup edit and click on bevel again. Select the face you want to bevel, click on bevel, and notice here it's beveling the edges. So let's reduce the bevel distance to something like 0.5 and check this out. click accept action, and now we have these beveled faces here, this one, and the other two. I will reset the cube without bevel, go back to PolyGroup mode, click on a face, click on PolyGroup edit again. So extrude and push pull, they are kind of very similar. So this is push pull and this is extrude. Notice the difference between these two is the UVs. So if you want to extrude your mesh and maintain the UVs, then you want to use push and pull. You also have the ability to delete faces, cut faces, retriangulate, recalculate normals, and more. I will click on cancel again. Let's create a simple new box. And let's go back to the model mode, PolyGroup edit. In addition to face edits, we also have shape edits. We can insert an edge loop, we can insert an edge, and we can simplify our meshes by groups. So insert edge loop, this will insert an edge loop as it says. So if you add few like this, and let's add one here, click and click done and click accept. This might be a good time to talk about subdivide. Click on it, and based on our loops, we have the subdivision. Here, it's more than what we have here. For example, if you go back to PolyGroup edit, we have insert edge. So this will allow you to cut between two edges like so, or do this. Click done. Now we have these two polygroups. Click accept. And if you switch to wireframe, you can see our cut on the mesh. Let's go back to let's click on the mesh and go back to PolyGroup edit. Click on a specific edge. Let's say delete the edge. Now it's gone. You can also fill the hole. So let's try, for example, to delete one of these or disconnect it. And now here we have a hole in the mesh. So if you click on fill hole, first let's click on the edges, and now we click on fill hole, and that fixed the mesh for us. There are more operations. In addition to these, we have UVs. So UVs here, it says planar projection. Select a face and then simply move your mouse, and you can now change the UVs of the mesh. Click, and look at that. We also have selection filters. So if you don't want to select the vertices, or if you just want to select the vertices, you can do that from here. You can turn off your selection filter. Now we are only able to select faces, or you can switch it to just edges and just vertices or edges together. If you have both enabled and click and drag, this will highlight your vertices only. If you don't want this, then disable this and move, and now this will select our edges only, just like this. Let's press Ctrl Z. In addition to the click and drag to select, you can also enable the edge loop selection. Click this, click, and now we have the edge loop just like this. Click this edge, move it to the left or to the right. We also have the ability to ring our selection. First, let's disable this, and now click. This will select all the surrounding edges in a ring selection mode. I will click on cancel. Let's talk about PolyCut. This is really nice. You can select an operation. So we have cut through, trim outside, trim inside, and insert a polygon. In addition to the operation types, we also have a shape. So there is a circle, square. Let's make the square smaller. And we have rectangle, we have rounded rectangle, and we have a custom shape. And by custom, you can draw a polygon. Let's do this. And here we are. This is amazing, the ability to do this directly inside Unreal Engine. Click accept, and now we're good. You can also mirror. So this is like symmetry to create unique and nice shapes. Click accept, and that's the mirror. Click on PlaneCut, and that will cut the mesh based on how you move the gizmo here. Once you're happy, you click accept. If no, you want to flip it, then click on flip plane, and this will flip our plane. Click accept, and that's very nice. Let's talk about Boolean. Let's select this shape and make a duplicate. I will click Alt, move, and I will set it in the corner here. And now I will select these two, and here I will select Boolean. and you have the operation. There is a difference, A minus B or B minus A, intersection, and union. Union will merge these two together and their typology. Difference B minus A or difference A minus B, it depends on our first selection. And notice that you can change the location of the object you are booleaning object from. So once you're happy, you can click on accept. Moving forward, we can go now to mesh processing. And from here, we can triangle select as we did earlier. This is really much easier to select faces and delete them or disconnect them than using the PolyGroup edit. If you want to do some mesh operations, I recommend using triangle select. Select what you want to select and you can delete the triangles easily. You can also do that from the PolyGroup edit, but it's much harder to delete specific faces or do a certain selection unless you have the polygroups. But from here, it will simply, no polygroups, select your triangles and do whatever you want. There is no need to press Ctrl or anything to expand your selection. So now I'm just pressing with my left mouse button and it's adding my selection. If I want to reduce my selection, then I press on Shift. And if I want to select things again, I will release my hand from Shift and just click again. If you press Alt and left mouse button, you will orbit around your selection. Right mouse button, you will zoom in and out, and the middle mouse button by itself, it will work as the camera pan. So I use this a lot when I am working on my objects just to be able to move better around what I'm doing. The operations we have delete, disconnect, flip normals, create polygroup, separate, duplicate, and smooth border. In addition to these, we have the selection mode, we have a brush, we have a volumetric brush. This is extremely useful. If you have a very dense mesh, you want to have a volumetric selection, you can do that. And you have more modes. I leave the exploration of these buttons and options here for you because we are shorter on time. Moving forward, we have triangle edit. And this will simply allow you to select a triangle or multiple triangles. So hold Shift to select multiple triangles and you can edit these triangles just like so. You can also weld, fill holes, bridge, extrude, and you can flip, cut, insert, and so on, just like what we saw earlier under PolyGroup edit. So they are kind of similar, but this one is for the triangles. Click on cancel. Fill holes, pretty self-explanatory. So I'm going to select something and let's select this face and let's delete it. Sometimes you might have some objects like this. So if you click on fill holes, it will show you the hole. Click on it and it's filled. So this is also very easy to use. If you know you've imported meshes with multiple vertices or edges on top of each other, you can weld them. If you also want to merge mesh together, so earlier we saw Boolean and here we have union. So you can select one or multiple and then do union, click accept, and now this is one mesh. Jacket, simplify, these are perfect for CAD data. Now we're talking. So you can see how useful this is when you export to Unreal Engine data that maybe is not prepared. So let's say I will show you here an example. I downloaded all these assets you see from manufacturer's website. So they are not 100% ready for Unreal Engine. So I'm gonna duplicate one of them. Actually, we can work on the duplicate we did earlier. Let's click on mesh and let's click on jacket. This will reduce the meshes that we don't see. It's good for performance. I will not get deep into this. I will show you something else. Let's click on simplify. And from here, you can set the target percentage of your mesh. If you have a very dense mesh, you can reduce it. So let's say, set it to 10, give it a few seconds to load. And now it's simplified. Now it's way more simplified than it should, but you can also change the simplifier type. And obviously it's not recommended to simplify your complete mesh like this. So if you go back, click on the wireframe, you can see these meshes are fine, but let's say this is way too much. So what you do in this case, go to triangle select, go to volumetric brush if you want to select multiple meshes together. So let's try first just using a brush. Let's reduce the size of that brush and click. it selected this as well. So this is a scenario where you want the volumetric brush sometimes, so you don't click a billion times on your meshes. Click volumetric brush, and now this will select volumes. Once you select a part, flat fill, now you can click on separate, click accept, give it a few seconds. Now click on this mesh, the submesh. Now go to simplify, reduce how much you're simplifying this. And let's try changing the algorithm. There is QEM, this is the fastest. It will produce errors as it says here. There is normal aware, slightly better. There is UE standard, this is the old standard method. So let's click on 10, give it a few seconds, and this works like magic. This is really nice. Click accept, and it still maintain the exact same shape from outside, but it went from being like this to this. This is really good. We also have Remesh. So if you click here, you have the target triangle count. You can reduce it. This is one of the best ways to reduce the amount of polygons you have in meshes that you imported, or increase the polygons if you want to do displacement. This is also useful in this scenario, and you have more settings to work with. Now we have inspect, and this will tell you about your typology, what type of seams we have, what type, if there are openings. So this will help you debug problems. I click complete, and that should be it for this part here. Unless you have some questions, you want me to cover something in more depth, let me know in the comments and I'll happily do so. Click on UVs. This is really nice. I used to go back and forth between Unreal Engine and my tools of choice so much just to fix the UVs. And now we have an unwrap modifier inside Unreal where we can edit our UVs, not only project UVs. This is amazing. So I will show you an example. I think this is one of the objects that need fixing their UVs. You can simply project UVs. So if you click here, you can set the projection type from plane to box to cylinder to exponential map. Let's select the box and let's set the dimensions to 100 by 100 to 100. Fix this and click accept. Now that's fixed. It's beautiful. You also have the ability to auto UV your meshes. So let's say one of these meshes here, just for fun, click on auto UV. You have multiple options to work with. The method, you can change from patch builder to UV atlas to X atlas, and each will give you some result. You also have the ability to select the UV channel you want. So if an object have multiple UVs, you can select the UV channel you want to do auto UV mapping for it and click on accept when you're happy. And you also have the ability to change how this is working on your mesh. So how many patches, the curvature, the distortion threshold, and other settings. So I will reset these to where they were. Here, for example, there is some bad UV mapping happening. You can increase this little or increase the curvature first, increase the patches. We are getting, well, by looking at the checker map, this is kind of better. And you have these options to work with. You can also set the texture resolution, the assumed texture resolution. So now it's just 1K. And if you reduce this, you will see different mappings. And this will also play a big role in your UV islands. So preview UV layout, click here, and we can see in 3D the UV layout of this mesh. So reset these and take a look. Let's say change the texture resolution. They will now be further from each other, but if you increase this, they will be closer, and so on. You can change the material mode to the original checkerboard, or you can override it with one of your materials. So here is a grid material just for preview. Once you're happy, you can click on accept. We also have the ability to transform our UVs. This is really nice. Click on the face you want to transform and simply change it around. So let's see. A good example could be, let's say, this door or any other object you want to transform. Select that object, click transform, select the face, and simply move it. This is great if you want to create some variations on your textures. So let's say this is continuous. We don't want that. You can click on transform UVs, click the face, and move this like so. And once you're happy, click accept. and now we have slightly more randomization. There are times where you don't have access to the source data, or you just want to do quick fixes. This here allows you to do exactly that, and that's why I highly recommend being familiar with the modeling tools in the modeling mode, from UVs to remesh to deforms, and even create some meshes for your projects. We also have a UV editor. This is really good. Click, you're gonna see or not see what we have. So if you zoom out, you're gonna see your islands, and I want to pack my UVs. I can simply click on layout, and this will pack my UVs. And I can set the texture resolution and whatnot, just like we saw earlier. When you're happy, click accept, close this, you can save it, and now we have different mapping. From here you can paint polygroups, and this depends on how your UVs are packed, and you can lay out these UVs. From the UVs, you will most likely use a lot project UVs, transform UVs, and sometimes you may want to use UV editor. I will leave exploring the rest for you, and now let's move to attributes. This here, we discussed earlier how we can generate polygroups. This is great, but what's even greater is the edit materials. So let me show you an example. As I said earlier, all the furniture here I downloaded from the manufacturer website. They are not prepared for Unreal. So if I click here, this here has only one material, and that's not ideal. This is cloth, this is wood, right? So click on edit materials and click on the objects that you want to assign material for. So click to just mark your selection, click on flat fill to make sure that we are selecting the right mesh. Let's select all the wooden parts. So I'm simply just click and then flat fill. Let's say you've selected everything. Now you need to go to material, assign a new material or a new element, and for the active material or active selection, we can set this to none. And when you're happy, click on accept, and now our mesh have two materials, but I forgot to create new materials. So let's do that again. Let's go back to edit materials, select where we want the new material to be. Let's flat fill and let's select the active material to none. And let's not forget this time to click on assign active material. Click accept, give it a few seconds, and notice how all our objects now, the instances, have this part. It has now a second material. So let's do that on the rest. Click edit materials, click where you want the wooden material to be. Click on flat fill, make sure you select the material you want to assign, and then assign active material. Once you do that, click on accept, give it a few seconds, and here we are. So now I can select another material and assign it on my mesh. So now this has two materials. This is one of my favorite tools ever. You have no idea how many times I had to go back to Max, assign multiple material IDs, export the object again, and so on. So we can directly do this from Unreal Engine now. In addition to editing the materials, we can also edit the attributes of the mesh. So we can reset hard normals or clear the UVs or delete selected UVs, enable light maps on your mesh, and so on. So I will not edit anything. I wanted today to talk about the modeling mode to inspire you, hopefully, to look into these tools, to learn them, and to figure out how you can make them useful for your projects. I hope you found today's lesson useful. I hope you learned something new. If you did, let me know in the comments, and if you want to leave a like, that would be amazing, and I will see you in the next part. Take care.